This episode of the Auto Tech Show is sponsored by Tire Buddy from Anyline. Make every tire check accurate, consistent, and backed by data, no matter who does it. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our latest episode of the Auto Tech Show. My name is Mark Babb, and it's great to have you with me for what is set to be a fantastic show. Now, today on the show, we dive into the evolving landscape of automotive cybersecurity. Vehicles are becoming more connected and autonomous, yet many drivers remain unaware of the risks that come with that. In this episode, we explore why cybersecurity needs to be seen as a core feature, not an afterthought, and how the industry collaboration and open research are essential for staying ahead of emerging threats. We'll discuss how building driver awareness, embracing transparency, and working across brands are critical steps towards a safer automotive future. And who better to discuss that with me than leading cybersecurity expert Srivalli Boddupalli, the senior data scientist for cybersecurity at Lucid Motors. Srivalli, thank you so much for your time today. It's great to finally connect and have this chat. I know we've been planning it for a few months. Really appreciate you giving me the time this morning. I know you're in California, but yeah, super interested on this topic. It's an incredibly interesting one. So, and I know you're an expert on it. So yeah, first and foremost, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Really great to be here. And yes, it's a really exciting time with all the innovation that's happening in the electric vehicle space, in the autonomous industry. It's a very important juncture for us to focus on automotive cybersecurity. And as you pointed out, educate the consumers about why it's an important feature, not a feature, to be honest, why it's a necessity in their car. Great.
I like that we're kind of creating that differentiation, because I know we'll get into that specific point a little later on, but it is interesting. And maybe to kind of set the context for what we'll talk about today. Obviously, we've had a bit of a conversation leading up to today, and I found it really interesting. And maybe it's a nice way to kind of, again, set the stage here. Has to do with general awareness when it comes to cybersecurity risks, specifically when we look at these more modern connected vehicles that everyone seems to be getting more and more on the road these days. Cars are just becoming smarter, but there's a general lack of awareness on the cybersecurity area. Yeah. My question is, why is there such a blindness on this topic? Are we just too distracted and enthralled with all the tech features that are in the car that we're forgetting about what that actually means from a risk perspective?
When I think about it, what I understand is that when we think of a car, we are possibly thinking of a bunch of mechanical systems coming together and driving us from point A to point B. And yes, there are a lot of features that make my drive more convenient, but at the end of the day, it's a vehicle that's just getting me from A to B, right? But when you think about it, a car is essentially a computer on wheels. It's talking to the internet. It's very much a part of the Internet of Things. It has a multitude of communication capabilities, right? It's talking to your mobile device. You're remotely unlocking your vehicle through the key fob. You connect to the radio. You have in-vehicle Wi-Fi. You have a lot of other multimedia devices that are capable of talking to your vehicle. I can go on and on about how many different ways a car can talk to the world, right? And now, when I put it this way, it's probably easier for us to wrap our heads around, then just like any other device, any other computing device that connects to the internet, my car is connecting to the internet as well, and therefore it's susceptible to cybersecurity threats. Right? But unless you switch from car being just a bunch of mechanical systems to actually realizing that today's modern cars are a collection of computing systems, complex computing systems working together, that's, I think, an important distinction to make. It's probably not as intuitive to the common consumer.
Do you see it becoming more intuitive as we start to discover about what this smart car, these computer on wheels actually means for us? Once we get past that sort of hype cycle of everything that the car can do you actually see it becoming something that the general motoring enthusiast, the general consumer actually appreciates?
Definitely. I see a lot of progress happening in the right direction. The communication is not just confined within academic research groups or industry experts. It's actually coming down all the way to, as you said, enthusiasts, automotive enthusiasts. And
Right.
today's cars are pretty insane in terms of what they can offer you, right? And it definitely encourages you to think about, oh, how is this feature even possible, right? And just all of those features that we are accustomed to every day kind of make us think a little more about, oh, okay, my car doesn't look like the one that's from a few decades ago, and that's because of computing systems, and that's because it's connected to the internet,
Yeah.
which is also, unfortunately, the reason for it becoming very vulnerable and opening doors for a bad actor to exploit the vehicle. But that's also
Yeah.
enabling all of these features.
You bring up an interesting point there, and it's something I do want to ask because you are on the front line of this, obviously dealing with this for a major car brand. What are the real world consequences that consumers could face if we look at cybersecurity, if it doesn't become more of a prominent concern for both buyers and for manufacturers? What are the actual consequences that we could face?
That's a great question. So, for an automotive system, a security breach is as good as a safety attack on the vehicle. Right? So you basically cannot isolate the vehicle's safety from a security breach. When I say that, what I mean is once an attacker gains access to your vehicle through any means, be it through a security attack or other means, they are free to impact the safety as well as the privacy of the users. Today, your vehicle actually knows a lot about you. It has a lot of your personal information, which could very well be exploited by a bad actor once they exploit your vehicle through a security breach. So yeah, it's vehicle safety, it's your privacy, the vehicle can be stolen. You can see a lot of these being reported these days, vehicle
Right.
thefts through a cyber attack, right? And
Right.
these are just some of the most prominent impacts, and there could be a lot more which can enable a bad actor to learn more about your vehicle and cause a catastrophic impact later on.
And it is such an important topic, this one. And I think it's just becoming more and more complex, obviously, as more features and as more tech comes into the vehicle. But then, of course, these bad actors, they get more intelligent as they learn how systems work. I guess the challenge then, and what you have to specifically do in your role, and I certainly don't envy this, is, I guess, keeping the functionality of the car the same, keeping that openness, but then also limiting the risk, limiting the danger that if someone were to gain access, everything isn't as connected so that they can't infiltrate operational and safety issues. I guess that's the real challenge, right?
That is true. And it's a very difficult problem to solve. And being in the industry, I can see a lot of progress being made in that direction. As you pointed out, security is not really just about being able to detect something abnormal. It's also about regaining the functionality of the vehicle, ensuring the safety of the vehicle under a threat, under an ongoing attack. And in the first place, being able to minimize the vulnerabilities in the vehicle that a bad actor could exploit, right? So all of this comes under the umbrella of automotive security. And at each stage, right from the design stage all the way to monitoring your vehicles once they are out in the world, there are security standards, processes, and dedicated teams and organizations working to ensure that the vehicles are kept safe, safe from a security attack.
Right.
So I also would like to emphasize on the fact that industries are coming together to collaborate and share their knowledge about what kind of vulnerabilities could exist in different automotive systems and how do you go about mitigating them, and essentially this knowledge sharing could bring the industry well ahead of the bad actors' knowledge, right? And this is something that's enabled through different forums, and one of such forums is Auto Isaac, where industries come together and share their knowledge about known vulnerabilities in automotive systems, and quick knowledge transfer around mitigation techniques as well.
That's really good to hear that events like that are popping up. And I also see it becoming more of a prominent topic at the Standard Automotive Show. I mean, in the last 5 years, even a few years ago, you wouldn't have seen this topic as one that offered a panel discussion or offered a keynote speaking event or had companies in the space on the show floor. But you're seeing that now. Do you think that's a result of people coming together and saying, hey, this is actually important. We need to talk about this from manufacturer side, from tech and third party providers? Everyone coming together and speaking louder is making a difference at these events?
Definitely. It's definitely a positive consequence of, more awareness and the domain of automotive security becoming more mature by the day, right?
Right.
If you think about it, the discussion around automotive security and remotely hacking into vehicles has started more than a decade ago,
Right.
in a very effective manner, I would say. Up until that point, I think I'm talking about the specific point in time where a hack, an ethical hack by a group of researchers has become extremely popular. It's widely known as the Jeep Cherokee hack.
Okay.
Publicized in 2012, 2015 period. And that, I think, is a turning point. And why I say that is, up until then, the philosophy was more around security through obscurity, where what I mean to say here is academic research groups say they've found vulnerabilities in a real car. They've done their extensive research and found ways to hack into it, but they wouldn't share that knowledge publicly because that would enable a bad actor to learn about the vehicle, right? That's the mindset. Now, eventually, we've come to the realization that the bad actor has all the time in the world.
Yeah.
They would get ahead of you regardless, right? Now, the only way for you to stay ahead of the curve is by actually sharing everything that you know with others in the research community, opening up the field for more people to start contributing. And that's the only way you can stay ahead. And that was the shift. And I think Charlie Miller and Chris Walasek need to be credited for this shift in mindset, where they were completely open about how they hacked into the vehicle, right? And that actually moved the needle in the right direction in securing our vehicles and staying ahead. So that's something that's pretty, that I believe is a pretty important juncture in the trajectory of automotive cybersecurity.
Digital tire inspection at your fingertips. Introducing Tire Buddy.
I like that the especially the note on just being more open and being willing to share this information. I think is a huge step forward, and it's great to see that happening. And again, we're seeing that reflected at industry events and events like you mentioned that are solely focused on this. So I think that's a huge step forward. The next step forward that I'm curious about is when we reach the point of which these safety features are as common knowledge or as commonly shared from manufacturers in their marketing of a vehicle. Do you think we'll get to that point? Is that the very next step, is understanding the problem as we're doing, learning about it, but then communicating that these vehicles are safe just as any other safety feature of a vehicle? Do you see us making that jump?
Yeah, I would like to think about the example of seat belts here, right? Back in the day, a few decades ago, when seat belts were not the mainstream, were not mainstream yet, right? If you think about it, it's not really a feature of convenience, or it's not really a feature that's comfortable for the driver, right?
Sure.
But we've adapted seat belts like it's an extremely essential component of your vehicle once the auto manufacturers started marketing as one of the most important safety features. And what triggered the manufacturers to do that are government regulations.
Okay.
You were mandated to have seat belts because there's research that proves that seat belts can save lives. And government has mandated that. There's a regulation now that you have to abide by. Now, auto manufacturers got creative. They put their minds together and they were able to sell it as they made it very marketable, right? They were able to sell it as a feature that's extremely, extremely critical for you to have in your car.
Correct.
It's probably going to be something very similar with security as well, right?
Okay.
Because cars as such are quite expensive to manufacture. Cars with all the nice features to have are even more expensive to manufacture. Now, building a vehicle that checks all the boxes is it's a very complex problem to solve. And while they're solving it, if there is a push from government agencies as well to regulate and to mandate certain security standards in every single vehicle that's out there, then this progress is going to be much faster. And there will be enough motivation for all the players involved to kind of package this in a way consumers are willing to pay for, right? So, that's the normal trajectory of things in the automotive industry, I guess.
It's really interesting, this balance between innovation, whether you're innovating new features or new practices or new safety protocols, as we're talking about here, and the compliance side. I think that's a really interesting balance. It actually is one that came up on the panel at Move in London. Here was this talk about balance. We had the UK Transport Department panelist on the stage, and this came up. I'm curious your impression of it. Obviously, on this factor, compliance helping from a marketability factor. How does it affect the work that you do? Do you challenge the innovation of how you're creating these systems and these solutions, and then compliance comes in, or do you rely on compliance to sort of set a guideline, a minimum standard that then you hit above? How is your relationship with that?
That's a very interesting question, because compliance from compliance standpoint, you would still think that there are a few industry players who actually enabled that. Because the knowledge essentially comes from academic research communities and industry experts who have a vision, who can see ahead of time beyond, a point where all of this is not yet the norm, right? Visionaries like that actually push for compliance as well, is what I believe. Because government agencies also, at the end of the day, rely on experts from academia and industry. right? So it's more circular than I would think so. There would be a few industry players who enable better standards that everyone else in the industry is willing to accept. When there is enough momentum in that direction, that's when government agencies enforce such standards, because ultimately they also want the standards to do something good, right?
Of course.
So you only enforce when you know that the standards are actually effective. And how do you know that if you are not relying on industry experts and academic research experts, right? So it's a very interdependent equation. It's not just driven by one independent agency. It's a collective effort. It's a collaborative effort in every sense.
And I guess that comes back to your point on the industry sort of coming together, being more transparent with everyone to make that step. And I guess that comes from the compliance and that government body as well. The challenge is obviously compliance and regulation is going to be different regionally. How does that set a guideline for a manufacturer that's going to distribute cars across the globe? How do you balance all the different local compliance and regulatory bodies that are all going to have different rules if you're in Europe and the US, all over the world? That seems like an incredibly complex equation.
It is. It's extremely challenging because, the market acceptance, right, is a very important factor. And what's acceptable level of safety or what's acceptable level of security is very different from different, it's defined very differently. I would put it that way. At the end of the day, everybody wants the most secure and most safe product that's out there. But how it's defined or how it's mandated is very different in different regions of the world. And you have to kind of adapt your development cycle to meet that requirement. And it's and I would probably not know everything about it because this is such a deeply complex and unique challenge for each and every subsystem of the vehicle. But I'm very sure that there are dedicated processes that account for the differences in all of these standards being very different for each region that they operate in. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. I think it's going to become a more substantial part of the organizations as this develops more and more, as regulation comes out. I mean, I'm sure there are regulations that you're building systems to now, but a lot of this isn't public. Going to a dealership, and I highly doubt any of the salespeople would even know a lot of these safety regulations because it hasn't reached that level yet. It hasn't become one of those marketable aspects. But it is nice to hear what you said earlier, that is coming, and it is going to be one of those features in balance with the compliance as that comes out as well. I think that's when people will start to realize it. An interesting point, and I do want your take on this as well. Obviously, it's great to see the industry working together. It is great to see all this collaborative, like-minded experts have these conversations. At what point does the competitive nature of automotive step back in and information is maybe a bit more siloed and kept a bit closer to the chest for what perhaps you're building versus a competitor?
That mindset is always going to be there. There always has to be a competitive edge for industries to do better, deliver better products, and, make bigger innovations. So the competitive edge is always going to be there. The maturity in the field is kind of reflected when they also identify value in collaboration. It's not just purely out of, doing good, but there is actually inherent value for every player involved in that collaboration. And that's the only way it can be a sustained effort, right? And we've seen this kind of maturity in realizing the value of collaboration in other fields. Say, for example, in the semiconductor industry, you have several players that are making a mark today, and there's a lot of competition. But at the end of the day, they also collaborate on a few aspects where they agree to do things together in a few aspects. And there is value in it. They're not doing it by losing something, but they're actually, in fact, gaining a lot by collaborating and by following a set standard, right? And they've arrived at that point, over the years. And that's something that will happen in the automotive industry as well, is what I believe. And you already see something like that influencing standards, because unless there is a little bit of understanding within the community about the value in collaborating and agreeing on something standard, there is not going to be much progress in terms of developing effective standards, right? So we are seeing progress in standards becoming more and more practical, more and more effective with each improvement. And that's just a sign of the industry willing to collaborate, right? And not by giving up on the competitive edge, but by actually also collaborating while staying competitive.
I think that's a really nice point because, obviously traditionally and historically, the automotive industry has been notoriously competitive, like any other consumer good, but even maybe a bit more just because it is such a there's so much more to it when people go to purchase a car. There's so much more competition between brands and real personas behind the brands. As this evolves, as cars become more integrated with all of the different elements of our life, it's going to become even more of a personal attachment, more of a significant purchase. So I'm glad that competitive edge is staying there, but then also, like you say, finding that deeper rooted value in connecting, in building systems that keep everyone safe. I think that's a really important point to make. And I'm glad you did bring that up. It's a super interesting topic. I really enjoyed the deep dive on it. It's, again, unless you're involved in it, it's one of those topics you don't know about. So I'm glad we can speak about it and sort of get it a bit more out there in terms of awareness. And obviously the work you're doing is going to be on the front line of that. And it is great to have the insights from you on this talk. So I really do appreciate the time. Thanks for giving us, as much as you can share on the topic. I know there's probably a lot that you can't talk about, but I appreciate the insights you're willing to share. Any final comments, anything that you think we may have missed before we wrap it up?
This was a very good conversation, and I think we touched upon a lot of interesting aspects of automotive security, and I hope this would encourage someone who is new to the domain to go back and try to learn a little more, try to educate themselves a little more about the current threats of automotive cybersecurity and what they can do to actually push the needle in the right direction.
I think that's a great final point as well, to really get involved and learn about what you can, so it's not such a shock when things do come up and things do adjust with compliance and features on vehicles. So great final point. Srivalli, thank you so much for today. This has been a fantastic talk. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. Same here.
And for everyone watching and listening to this episode of the Auto Tech Show, thank you very much for being with us. It's a fantastic topic. As I mentioned, a whole new world and a whole new ocean, it seems like, to dive into information-wise. I'm going to put some resources down in the podcast notes below. So if you do want to learn more about this topic or get in touch with us, please do head down below and reach out. Certainly love having those conversations with you. It always sparks new ideas for future topics. So definitely go have a look there. But with that, we'll bring this episode to a close. I wish all of you a fantastic day in the world wherever you may be. Have a great rest of your summer. We'll see you for a new episode of the Auto Tech Show very soon. Again, a big thank you to our sponsor for this episode, Tire Buddy from Anyline. Try Tire Buddy today. Head to anyline.com and get your free trial subscription.